Last time we talked about demand and the quantity demanded in the market. Now we're going to talk about supply, and we're going to put ourselves in the shoes of suppliers and what happens to our market when there are certain changes in the supply or there are conditions that may change the supply of certain goods and services in that market. So let's get started. Here you will see our imaginary market of shirts once more. And this time we have three suppliers, Pram, Mook, and Le. And you will see their individual supply schedule. All right? You will see, for example, that when the price of a piece of shirt is 95 baht, Pram is willing to supply 120 pieces of shirts in the market. Mook, on the other hand, is willing to supply 300 pieces of shirts in that market. And Let is willing to supply 50 shirts in that market. Supposing that the price of shirts increases to 350 baht a piece, what will happen? Prem is willing now to supply 300 pieces of shirts in the market. Mook is now willing to supply 550 pieces of shirts in the same market. And Let is willing to supply 220 pieces of that same shirt in the market. You will see here a trend that when the price of a certain good or services increase, suppliers tend to increase their willingness to supply that same good or service. Why? Because price acts as an incentive for suppliers. You see, when a good or service is priced higher, then our suppliers would want to produce more of that because they are going to earn more by supplying that good or service. Now, how do we get the entire supply schedule of the market given these individual supply schedules? Well, because in this imaginary market, we only have three suppliers, Pam, Mook, and Let, then all we have to do is to add them together. So you see, at the price level of 95 baht, we're just going to add 120 and 350, and we're going to get 470 pieces of shirts in the market. The entire market will have 470 pieces of shirts supplied when the price of a shirt is 95 baht. Supposing the price of a shirt increases to 350. Well, we just again add and we get the entire market's supply schedule at 1,220. And at the top end, when the price of a shirt is 500 baht, then the entire market will be flooded with 1,625 pieces of that shirt. Now, how do we read through a supply curve? Well, this is the supply curve that is derived from our supply schedule. So on your x-axis is the quantity supplied, and on your y-axis is the price level, right? You will see here that, for example, at the price level of near 125, there will be 590 shirts supplied in the market. At the price level of 275, there will be 990 shirts supplied in the market. All right. So you will see here our, and at 500 baht, you will again see that the quantity of shirts in the market available is 1,625. Okay. So our supply, however, is rather depends not only on price, but also you will see here that there is a positive relationship or a direct relationship that exists between price, right? A direct relationship that exists between price and the quantity of shirts supplied. This means that as price increases, so does the quantity supplied increase. And likewise, price decreases, when price, on the other hand, decreases, the quantity supplied decreases. However, it is not only price that determines the movement of supply in the market. There are what we call non-price determinants of supply, and we are going to discuss them one by one. Here, the first non-price determinant of supply that we are going to discuss is technology. Now, what will happen if a new sewing technology is invented that can double the number of shirts for half the time? That's a no-brainer. Our market will have more shirts supplied. That means that our supply curve shifts to the right. You see, for the same amount of, or for the same price, for the same price level, there will be now more shirts in the market. Okay, so for example, at 125, before there will just be 590 shirts. This time there will be maybe 900 something shirts in the market. Okay, so a shift to the right. That's what happens to technology. Okay, now another non-price determinant of supply is what we call the price of inputs or raw materials. When the price of raw materials increases, generally the supply in the market will decrease for that good. For example, supposing of course, our shirt production is dependent on electricity because our sewing machines are electric. Now, supposing that electricity increased, the price of electricity increased by 2 bahts per kilowatt hour. That is dire because then that will make the cost of production higher. So what happens? There will be less shirts in the market. Why? Because our suppliers are now less willing to make shirts. They become less willing to make shirts. Why? Because the price of making one is too steep. So we have here a shift to the left. Right. If, for example, the opposite thing happened, if the price of electricity, which is a raw material for making shirts, becomes lesser, then the shift will become to the right. Or, for example, another raw material is, let's say, cotton. What if the price of cotton decreases? When the price of cotton decreases, our suppliers will now consider it more advantageous to produce shirts because it takes a lesser amount to make one. And so the shift again will be to the right. Another non-price determinant of supply is the price of related goods. So take, for example, blouses. Blouses are a substitute for shirts to girls. And they use the same material, which is textile, let's say cotton. So what will happen if the price of blouse increases by 50%? Well, our suppliers will think, I'd rather change from making shirts to making blouses because it blouses are pricier, I'll get more money. I'll earn more money by selling blouses instead of shirts. So, what will happen to the supply of shirts in the market? It will obviously shift to the left. Why? Because suppliers now will change. Instead of making shirts, they will make blouses. All right. So that's for the price of related goods. Supposing the opposite happens, sir. What if blouses became cheaper? Maybe it became out of trend. So what will happen? Well, now our suppliers will think that it is more advantageous to keep on making shirts instead of blouses. And in that case, the supply curve will shift to the right. Now, another non-price determinant of supply is government intervention, usually in the form of taxes. So supposing what will happen to the supply of shirt in the market if the government were to tax shirt production by 3%? What does that mean? If today a shirt is 100, it costs, the making of shirt costs 70 pesos, for example, then the government will have to tax 3% of 70, which is around 2 pesos, 2.1, 2 pesos 10 centavos. Um, the government will take that from the maker of shirts. What will happen? It means that it is now more expensive to make shirts because I have to pay an extra 3% to the government just because I'm making shirts. That will act as a discouragement for our suppliers to make shirts. So what will happen is they will produce less shirts. Taxes in general, okay, taxes on the production of certain goods and services in general will shift the supply curve for that good or service in the market to the left. Taxes act as a discouragement, a disincentive for making shirts or any good or service for that matter. Okay, let's move on to another non-price determinant of supply, the size of the market. What do you mean by that? We're just talking here about the number of suppliers in the market. Suppose in our imaginary shirt markets, three more suppliers came in, Dang, Kiao, and Oi. What will happen? Because there are more suppliers, it's very easy. Our market will be flooded with shirts. Simply because there are more suppliers now in the market, more making shirts. The opposite also may happen, supposing one of the original shirt makers uh, decided to stop making shirt. What will happen? Okay, because the market becomes smaller, then the supply of shirts will also shift to the left. Okay, now the last non-price determinant of supply we're going to discuss is future expectation. Okay, our future expectation of things to come also will affect our supply in the market. Supposing we know that in the next 6 months, shirt will be needed as campaign material. Our candidates have chosen colors, and wherever they go, their supporters wear shirts of that color. And that means that in general, there are many shirts that are needed right now in the market. So our suppliers they are they are astute businessmen. Okay, they know that there will be a lot of shirts needed because now is the campaign season. So what will happen? They will produce more shirts. That situation becomes an incentive for them to make more shirts. So in the end, because of that hopeful expectation, there will be more shirts in the in the market supplied. Shift to the right. So I hope with this example, you are able to know now, okay, how supply works and what happens to supply given certain the action of non-price determinants of supply. Now, before we go, I just like to make a clear distinction between quantity supplied versus, okay, sorry, this is quantity supplied versus supply. Okay, quantity supplied is the quantity of shirts available in the market at a given price level. Supply is the general availability of shirts in that market at a given a certain condition. And so movements in quantity supplied means movements directed by prices. This is when price goes high. Okay, we have talked about this earlier. When price of a certain good or service increases, the quantity supplied of that good also increases. Or oppositely, if the price goes down, our suppliers feel that it is no longer profitable to make that good, so they lower their supply of that good in the market. Movements in supply, however, are determined by non-price determinants of supply. Okay, and this is what we are talking here are shifts, okay, to the right or left. And here we are talking about the response of the supply curve to certain non-price determinants of supply, like government intervention, future expectation, the size of the market, the price of related goods, the price of inputs, etc. Huh? So quantity supplied is movement along the curve. Supply, when we talk about movements of supply, we are talking about shifts of the supply curve to the right or to the left. All right. So I hope you got that you got the distinction between the two. Thank you very much for staying and see you next time.